All right, and we are live.
Yes.
All right, welcome to the very first Thru Port Collective live stream. Glad that everybody's here, and this is something that we've really been looking forward to, and we'll tell the story about how it all came together. And oh crap, there we go. Had a browser window open and was playing through. Yeah, because there's got to be mistakes the first time.
Of course.
Welcome to live.
There's no kidding.
All right, yeah. So this is a Thru Port Collective, and very first show, we'll tell you a little bit about ourselves. Tim, why don't you tell us about yourself first?
The quick trajectory. Yeah, sure. I grew up in a household with lots of music. There was no way I could escape, being involved with music, and it was in my soul. So, I started out playing drums and piano kind of about the same time, just by ear around age 5 or 6. And then, just developed that through the years. Got better, took some lessons, started auditioning, started doing gigs, wanted to do session work. So I started doing that as a player, and then always loved synthesizers. That was always on my horizon. But mostly drums have been my thing. That's kind of how it's definitely how I've made my living, other than some songwriting. And yeah, man. And I lived in Dallas. After that, I lived in Los Angeles for 8 years. And then I moved to Nashville, where I am currently doing session work and writing and some live gigs and some synth work on my own and a little bit of film work, which has been really cool and gratifying.
Nice. How about you, Marshall?
Yeah, so for me, I don't really have any formal training or anything like that. It was more of a situation where I went to a club one time when I was in my early 20s, and they were playing a bunch of trance and techno and stuff, and I was like just really amazed at what I was hearing and wanted to figure out how to do it myself, and started me off on this crazy journey that I'm still on today, basically. But yeah, it's a good time.
It's
How long?
oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, Marshall, how long ago was that?
That was in 2001.
Okay.
It's been about 21 years now.
And how would you describe your music? I know you do psytrance, but kind of what's the breadth of it?
I'd say that's my just like general trance in general is kind of like my favorite thing. But I've done
Mm.
things like electro house, you know, regular house, I guess if you can call it that, um, techno and trance, and then I've also done some orchestral stuff, some like cinematic scoring type stuff. I've done for a few little projects here and there. So, and I'd say, but yeah, the main my main genre would be trance.
Mm. Nice. Well, I started in the early '90s, I guess. I mean, pretty formally. I did some music before that in the '80s, but was not really serious about it. But early '90s, electric guitar, got deep into that. Classic rock, blues, metal, all that kind of fun stuff, and started playing live, I suppose, around '93 maybe. And yeah, just did band stuff for quite a while. I was, working, and then eventually, um, got hired to do different things, arrangements, played a lot of lead guitar in bands, and also some singing as well. Although singing's not the thing that I prefer to do, but it did get me gigs, so to speak. So
Hmm.
and then a little of everything else, like just I think being a musician, how it's portrayed in media is very glamorous, but when you're seriously working at it, it's not a very glamorous thing. So it's like, yeah, I can help you set up sound systems and get jobs doing whatever you can. And so just fortunate to work as a musician for quite a while, and again, mainly guitar based stuff, but was always kind of like the old analog synth sound. But at the time that I started playing, that wasn't really a popular thing, and so I didn't know anybody that had any of that stuff that I could talk to them about it. And I had eventually got a Juno and started kind of figuring out synthesis, but more recent years just really fell in love with it. And there's so much more information now online, to find out. Like even if locally you don't have someone that that is into it to kind of help you through it, like you can find out all this information online. So yeah, I mean that's kind of how I got started. And I think we kind of met probably through Jamie's show, right? I know Marshall.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because I think Marshall was on there a little before I was, right after he started the show. And then I kind of knew you through there, but I also remember that we were always talking Moog 1 stuff because we were both had early Moog 1s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Geosense is definitely our common factor there. Geosense Sense Show.
And
Yeah,
if
man.
anybody doesn't know, like we're on there once a month. I think it's the second week of the month as Team US, so you can check out that as well. That's a fun show.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah, man. Dude.
So let's talk about like how the show came together, because that's kind of like where we've been a little bit, and how we kind of found out about each other. And to get to this point, though, I think like maybe I'll start it off because I had left ProSynth Network in December of last year and took some time off. And one of our mutual friends, Cy Alexander, we keep in touch. And he's actually, what's nice is he's from England, but he's a pilot, so he flies out here. So we've gotten to meet up, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you start a synth show?" I was like, I was kind of thinking about it because I really enjoy, talking to friends and about synthesizers and recording and all this. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's a lot of work." And then he kept bugging me about it. And so I had started to have these ideas in my head about like, well, yeah, I mean, I know what I like and what I would like to do, but the main thing became who do we do this with? And for Simon, like with his traveling schedule and stuff, he's not able to be here every weekend. Also, it's like 2 a.m. for him right now, so that makes it tough.
Yeah,
and so
bunch of people in the chat too. I'm seeing. Yeah, it's late.
Yeah, I bet you guys are troopers, Steve and Wagyu, man. It's like 2 and 3 in the morning, I think. Yeah, but yeah. So I started talking about it, and when I got, there was one time that Cy and I really got into discussing this idea, and I was like, yeah. And before I had even said anything, he's like, "Dude, you got to get Marshall." He probably didn't say "dude" because he's not from California, but it was like, it's like, dude, you got to get Marshall. And I was like, "Oh yeah, well yeah, of course." And then I'd already been thinking about. I was like, "Yeah, and Tim, like those guys." And we had, so I don't remember what it was, January or February or something, probably February. I had come back on Team US, and Marshall was still there. And I think just before I came back on, you had Tim, you had started with Team US also. And so that's just having done some shows together, it's like, oh well, there's some chemistry here. Like, and I said this on Jamie's show. Like, you guys are guys that I respect. There's a diversity of like musical style and influences, together. And so that's when I kind of brought it to you guys. Like, hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah, great idea. That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because we have while we have like really diverse backgrounds in some ways, there's such crossover points, that are really our common crossover points are really strong. So it's fun to get together basically and just kind of talk about stuff and go, yeah, but wow, you do this, but then we can all land on, yeah, however, we all do this, but you do it that way, and that's just interesting and fun. And like you said, it makes for a really cool chemistry, and just a fun hang basically, which is kind of what this show is about in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Just sharing info and hanging.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then drilling all over each other's setups.
Yeah. No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, not envious at all. No, not at all. Which is ridiculous because we all have pretty nice setups, but it's
Yeah.
funny, just like, wow. Wow. Mm. Yeah, man. Well, yeah, so like show mission is cool too because we want to just cover broader concepts and broader topics, basically, than a lot of the synth shows for sure that are out there. We want to cover some recording techniques, and we want to cover process about how we get things done, and songwriting, and definitely synths and whatnot, and maybe what gears burning us alive right now, or what's like what we want to get, or anything like that. But it's I think it's going to be cool to have like a different show like that, right? This is kind of the idea.
Yeah, and also having, perhaps something that's a little bit different is like, all of our friends have really great synth shows, and most of them are from Europe, and of course Ramsey's in Australia, but his two main guys, Darren and Andy, are from Great Britain. So it's a very like Eurocentric area.
Yeah.
As far as our community, which is cool because it's been introduced to a lot of stuff that maybe, or at least, particularly for me, I guess, because I was, more into the guitar stuff for a long time. And so been able to kind of be exposed to some of that stuff. But now we have an opportunity to kind of come at it from perhaps a little more of an American angle with it. So I kind of find that like, people from the United States and Canada in particular, I don't think I've talked to anybody from Mexico about synths, but I could say for at least Canada and US, like there's a little bit different kind of background, what kind of music we're into as far as synthesizers, and just a little bit different perspective. So that might kind of bring an interesting flavor to it, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah, and it's been great to get to know the European community through Jamie at Geosynths. That's really been interesting. It's something I never would have predicted would be happening on my radar. It's been very cool just to see how that sort of came together, and then Jamie and I became friends. Now the three of us have become friends, but just to know like a European audience, and to know a lot of people that are in the chat right now, but just a lot of people that follow his show, and it's a cool different perspective, like you're saying. And so it would be fun, in a sense. Maybe our non-disclosed mission in a way is almost to bring the two audiences together.
Yeah, there's been a lot of just over the time that I've kind of been a part of the community, it's fascinated me in that there are people that are all over the world that, like, I was telling you, like, I spent a lot of time around musicians, but I didn't know anybody that was really into synthesizers. And so we have this kind of opportunity to talk with people that are like-minded, and recording as well. Like, I mean, I've got a few friends that do some recording, and that's a little bit easier to find because you can find musicians of all different sort of instruments, making music and into recording. But, we had talked about, well, the synthesizer's kind of been the common point between us three, because I started with guitar, Tim with drums, and then Marshall synthesizer all the way. So that's kind of been a common element that we'll center around. But also we have these other influences coming out from there.
Yeah, the funny thing though is that I always wanted to play guitar, and when I was in high school,
Really?
I begged my parents to get me like an acoustic guitar, and then I didn't put in the effort. So, but I've always liked the synth sounds. Like in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of synth utilization in a lot of music. Although I'd say the 90s were probably more rock influenced overall, but still in pop music, lots of synths, and I always liked those sounds. And it wasn't until that day when I was at that club listening to trance music for the first time that I was like, holy crap, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard, you know. But it's kind of funny because I always, when I was in high school, I was into ska and like industrial rock.
Uh-huh.
Nice.
And yeah, it's just kind of weird because I always liked that stuff, but I didn't know anything about this whole other area of music. And it's always kind of to me, it's always been more popular in Europe, the stuff that I like, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
I don't. It's extremely difficult for, like, my friends always thought I was crazy, man. I'd be sitting there trying to figure out how to use this like tracker program to try and make music on because I did, you know, it was like some cheap little tracker that I found that I could program. Basically, I didn't know how to play a keyboard or anything, but that's kind of how like I got into this whole thing. Was the funny thing was starting on a computer and then
Yeah.
eventually moving to hardware and things like that. But
Was that like a piano scroll style, or what was the style of that?
yeah, it's a program called Dream Station. I can probably fire it up. Let me see. I think I got it on here.
You don't happen to have anything from early days like that lying around, do you?
Yo, yeah, I made tons and tons and tons of tracks with this.
That'd be fun to check out at some point.
Yeah, I've got a few things on my channel as well for that. I've posted a few of these, but let me switch
Yeah.
this. That's going to be super low res. You know, this is from way back in the day, but this is
Right.
it. See, it hit space bar and it starts scrolling through, and you
Okay.
you can make a track out of this whole thing. And I used to take the tempo and put it up to like 300 because I'd try and fake like arpeggios and stuff, and to get that kind of effect, you'd have to speed it way up and everything. So yeah, that's my first like foray, was messing with that thing for a long time.
That's cool.
I remember, I don't remember if we talked about this together or not, but Rebirth was, well, I had done some recording. I'd actually taken a college recording class, and we discussed, I think it was Digital Performer and using Romplers. It was some sort of Roland something or other that was using, and, you know, before I had any keyboards and was doing stuff. But then I remember my buddy coming over and he's like, "Hey, I got this cool program that's really, really fun and interesting, and it's like got synthesizers and drums and stuff," and it was Rebirth. And I remember, I don't know, like maybe, I don't know when it came out or when he brought it over. It was probably like late 90s, 97 or 98 or something like that.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there with those, like, you know, kind of 808 and 303 type stuff, making acid music, and had no idea that the acid was a thing.
Yeah. So the funny thing about that is Propellerhead, who's the company that made Rebirth, shortly, like, I don't know if it was late 90s or early 2000s, they came out with Reason. I think a lot of people are familiar with Reason. And that was what I actually ended up going to after messing with that Dream Station thing. After a few years, I got saved up enough money to buy Reason. And I had heard like this amazing demo track from Reason 2 by a guy named Unknown Source. And it was this like trance tune. I was like, that's exactly what I need. Like, I need this. So like I messed around with Reason for a long time after that. So interesting.
Cool. It's just cool, like how that spoke to you, that kind of music, you know, that style, that genre, or whatever. It's interesting how like that really just clicked for you.
Yeah, big time. Because before that, you know, I always liked music and everything, but I wasn't like, whoa, you know, I didn't become obsessed with it until then.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, to the point you're trying to make it, even.
Yeah, and everyone thought I was crazy, man. I'd just be sitting there for hours making these crappy sounding songs. I mean, they were not good, you know.
You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, the question that I want to know now is, when you got an acoustic guitar, what kind of music were you playing on that, or aspiring to play?
Yeah, I was learning chords and stuff, and I would try and play like Metallica. I liked Metallica back then.
Nice.
I'm trying to think of the other stuff. I couldn't really play a whole lot, to be honest with you. I kind of lost interest pretty quick because it's hard. Like playing a keyboard or piano is difficult also, but like I don't think it's anywhere near as hard as learning to play guitar. Like guitar is very intricate fingering and like your fingers hurt. Some people I've seen like their fingers start bleeding and stuff from the strings. So
Oh yeah. Well, if playing piano is like playing chess, playing guitar is like playing 3D chess.
yeah,
Because you have this, you have this movement on the neck and then up and down and at the same time. It's like, wow. And then thanks for the B string tuning in there,
Yeah.
the one major third in the tuning. Thanks for that.
yeah. That was funny.
Yeah.
Ramsey's saying he did kind of similar thing and including playing Metallica. So that's awesome,
Oh,
Ramsey. I
nice.
didn't know that about you, man.
That's very cool.
Yeah, well, I've seen him show his. I think it was he had an acoustic guitar, like a Takamine or something, and I remember him talking about that. But yeah, it's like when you know people in one context, like that's what I was trying to imagine. Like, what would Marshall Arnold play on guitar?
It's a great,
Well,
great question.
I was really into ska for a long time, like Real Big Fish. It was one of my favorite bands. I used to go see them live every time they came to Colorado. And I had some buddies that were all into it too, so we'd all go to their shows. Yeah, I really liked rock music for a very long time, and I still do. But this took me by like complete surprise and just had me in awe. Like I'm like, you can do one person can sit here and basically create all this by themselves. And I
I
thought
was
that was
going to
amazing.
ask, yeah, how much of that just, is the one person thing for you where you didn't have to rely on anybody else? Would you say that's a significant chunk of why you did it?
It's well, the main reason is because I really just thought it sounded super awesome. But the fact that you could also do it by yourself and not need to get 4 or 5 other guys or people with you to consistently show for practice and all this kind, is all as much effort as I wanted to put into it is what I was going to get out of it. In terms of creating, because like the cool thing about what I do is I can create everything. But if you learn guitar or you learn bass or you learn drums, you can really only play one of those one thing at a time. You need other people, especially if you're going to perform like live, you need other people to play the other instruments unless you're going to do a bunch of backing tracks or whatever. So I always thought like it's cool because it's all mine. Like I did all of it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is cool. That is cool. Like, and it's not really so much about the control, but it's definitely at the end of the day, it's like, but those are my parts. Like I came up with all of that. Like that puzzle that fits together musically is of my design, and there's a certain satisfaction you get out of that.
Yeah, I've kind of enjoyed I mean, the Beatles were a big thing for me when I started. And then, studying these guys and what they contributed to the band. And then also with George Martin, who's just a producer and tremendously talented guy. And in my opinion, one of the band, like, cause he had some very significant roles to play within their music. But the thing that I like about it is it was, when technology was coming in to the studio and they were very curious and experimented with a lot of things. At the same time, it was still like a simpler time, and so you can kind of see how the pieces work together. Whereas with a lot of modern music, especially pop music, I mean, if you watch some of these pop producers, it's extraordinarily intricate in all the stuff that they do in a DAW to make that sound happen. And so, when we're sitting, or like when I'm sitting here and working on music by myself, the kind of fun thing about it has been, I enjoy being in a band and I'd always rather do that. But when I do work on stuff myself, I guess my strategy has been a little more of like putting myself in the different positions and thinking that, like this sort of imaginary band, if you will, to step up and go, okay, now I'm the bass player. what does this song need for bass player from the bass player, and how is this going to contribute to the song, and how's it going to sound, and you're kind of bouncing through these multiple roles, especially in more rock based stuff, because all the components are a lot different, between drums and bass and all that. But that's kind of been one of the fun things for me, as far as like, well, if I have to make music by myself, which sometimes is nice because you get to do whatever you want. But when I get to that point where I'm like, man, I kind of wish I was playing with some other musicians right now, that I try to get in that mindset. But
Yeah, for me, it was like I just didn't know anybody that was into
mm-hmm.
anything like that. All my friends they just weren't into music like that at all. Because I could have seen myself, like, if I had a couple buddies that were like, let's start a band, and like I grab my Washburn, and here we go. But I just didn't know anybody. So I think that's also part of the reason that I ended up going down the path that I did.
It's so cool. Yeah. It kind of, I don't know, mine's all over the board too about all that, because I have played in bands the whole time, but I've also always done, like, I've had little home studios, tape based, even like, since I was probably, like 18, or well, before that, even my parents had some old Sony stereo deck that had sound on sound. So I could sit there and, like, record a drum part or something, and then come back and play a piano part over it. And then, but I guess what I'm saying is, like, I had the opportunity to sort of do the same thing, Chris, that you're talking about, and sort of play some different roles. And if I had a synth, I could play bass on it, obviously, and you can start to kind of fill some stuff out. But, that's what's been fun to me about home studio stuff. We should probably hit on that too for you guys. I'd be curious to know how you guys, like, what your first setup was, kind of thing.
Oh, we want to talk about first setups?
I mean, why not?
Like hardware?
Yeah.
So, everything. Yeah, everything.
My first, so I was in the box for a long time with Reason, and that actually taught me synthesis, because all the integrated modules within Reason emulated actual hardware. You know what I mean? So it taught me synthesis. The tracker taught me sequencing and song structure. And so the combination of those things actually made it to where, when I was able to start purchasing hardware, I knew kind of what to do with it. My first synth was it was an MS-2000, but I kind of didn't know how to use it very well, so I took it back, and I got a Roland SH-201. I used that for quite a while, I think. But that started kicking me off into buying other gear too. I would go to Guitar Center when they used to actually have synths in there that you could try out, right? And I remember seeing like the Nord Lead 2X and the Alesis Ion, and just being like, man, I think I need that. You know what I mean? I didn't really know what to get. But so, yeah, I started out with an SH-201 and just used Pro Tools. That was probably 2006.
Wow. Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, for me, so, I mean, first, just guitar, guitar and amp. I've had, I think I got an acoustic guitar really cheap as my second guitar. My first guitar was an electric, and I had an acoustic, but it was never my like main focus. It was always electric guitar. So just having the stuff to be able to play, and looking for people to be able to play with. But when it kind of came time, I had been doing songwriting. I remember recording songs. Like, I had this crappy old, it's like a tiny little microphone. I still have it in the garage somewhere, that was maybe with something that my dad had. It was probably from the 70s or 80s. And I remember plugging that into, I had a boom box, in my bedroom, and so I would record onto a cassette, like, and it just whatever you got from that, that's all you got, you know.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that was like my first recordings. But then sometime in high school, I got an old, well, not old at that time, although it was a Tascam 424 4-track machine. That was a cassette 4-track.
Cassette. Yep.
Yeah. And at some point, I had borrowed a reel-to-reel machine and used that, probably before the cassette machine. But the cassette machine was kind of my main thing for a while. And so 4 tracks, and again, kind of that very kind of vintage 60s. I loved a lot of like late 60s British rock. So, you know, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, with Jimi Hendrix as well. And you know, the American based in London, but kind of that whole scene, Cream and that kind of stuff. And so these guys weren't having much gear to record on. So it kind of put me in the mindset of like, well, how do I make this work with 4 tracks? Because I got a lot more than 4 things that I need to do. And so, you know, recording 3 things, bouncing the rhythm section, then adding vocals and a lead guitar and doing that kind of stuff, and just listening to your music degrade heavily every time you did that. And then, and I think around 96, I took a college class that was on recording, which I just told you guys about. So that was DAW, you know, in the box, which I really enjoyed actually. I was like, man, this should be the stuff of the future. I think this might work out, you know?
It's funny that you say that, because when I was using like Reason and stuff, I used to post to the Propellerhead forums all the time and get feedback, and they had a really great community on that forum for a long time. But I remember there were people that were totally against in the box anything. They were hard set on you need to have an analog mixer, record the tape, like all this stuff. And this was like in the early 2000s. I guess that was kind of like around the time though that digital recording started to become good enough. You know what I mean? But not everybody was using it. There were still people that were really frowned on in the box.
Yeah.
And now it's hilarious because that's all anybody uses now.
Yeah. Well, except yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I didn't know any of those people, and having spent so much time on a cassette 4-track, I just thought that was the most wonderful world to be able to record. And at some point, I think, you know, I was living on my own. I didn't have any money, and I think maybe my parents gave me their old computer, and I had Cakewalk in the like late 90s.
Yeah.
And then I went back to school and just I was playing live a lot still when I went back to college, but I didn't have a lot of time to record. So it really wasn't until, I don't remember what year it was now when GarageBand came out. Maybe some 2005 or something, or 4, I don't know, somewhere in there.
Was that an Apple thing, or I can't?
Yeah.
I remember GarageBand, but like I don't ever remember using it, and that's probably because right.
Yeah, it was Apple only, and so by that point I was already using Apple stuff, and so it's like, oh, here's a free DAW for your computer. And I started getting into that. I was like, this is great. This is even better than anything else that I've used. And it's, you know, workflow and everything. And it's a pretty stripped down DAW, but it was fantastic because now all of a sudden I had access to a bunch of other instruments that I didn't have access to. So I had got myself, it was like an M Audio, I think. It was just like, I mean, it was a silly little thing. It was like, a couple octave keyboard or something, and then on the back of it had an interface, so it had like mic preamp and everything, and so that was like my whole interface, and all the keyboard stuff had to be done on this little keyboard. But then I was able to do strings and organ and piano and everything else in my music, which I didn't have before. And then I know probably within a couple of years, I was like, okay, this is not enough, and I need to get Logic, and been in Logic ever since.
Logic's the go-to for you, yeah.
Yeah.
I've just been working on that. A buddy of mine just put out a record. He's a songwriter here in Nashville, and he's written a bunch of songs. He's put out like 18 records, I guess, full-length albums. But he just recently decided he would release just his solo rights that he's done over the past, I don't know, maybe 10 years probably. And so I think the song count ended up being 18 on this record. And I helped him sort of gently produce it. I would say I was kind of a co-producer on it, and mixer and sort of organizer and arranger, and he was doing it all in Logic. And my ubiquitous world is Pro Tools, so I had to kind of get into Logic and go, oh wow, oh yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. Anyways, I mean, it's just like anything. It was fun to learn Logic because it was the first thing I had ever done as a DAW was probably in '98 or '99, something like that. Was Logic, or maybe 2000 even. But I had forgotten everything, and plus, I mean, that's 22 years ago at the minimum, so it had changed a lot in its functionality and everything. But it was just a Logic thing because. Logic comparison, Chris, because it was just so much fun to kind of go back and learn Logic and go, oh wow, it's a great program, but it's Pro Tools is just like that for me, and on key commands, and I'm not mousing around, and in Logic I'm like, what,
Yeah, I learned Pro Tools really well for a long time, but the problem with Pro Tools that I always had that ended up killing it for me eventually, probably around 2015. I always had problems with the damn thing crashing. It would crash like all the time. And that's coming from like Reason that like never crashed. You know what I mean? Never. Like it almost never crashed. And this is on like old, like not super top end hardware. Like I used to use like laptops and stuff that I could, scrounge enough money to buy and use, and they weren't like top end or anything. But Pro Tools, it always used to crash on me all the time. And then the other thing that really started to grate on me was a lot of the cool like synth plugins that started coming out. You couldn't get them on Pro Tools. They were VST only. So then I started looking around like, well, what programs could I use instead? And the thing is that this is years. I started using Pro Tools in 2006, stopped in 2015. That's a long time, right?
Wow, that is.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was kind of reluctant to do it, but like I was like, I'm not getting what I want out of this DAW anymore. So I ended up going to Ableton. But this Cubase and some of these other ones, I remember Cakewalk, but I don't think I ever really used that back in the day. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting because even though it's the standard, right? Like for professionals, Pro Tools, man, it was not my favorite thing. I remember getting super mad and yelling obscenities at the computer multiple times.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I started doing a lot of use with Pro Tools with virtual instruments, probably around 2009, 2010, and it just wasn't. That was sort of almost felt like an afterthought, for what they do. It's definitely all about the audio recording and audio manipulation, and that's definitely what it was. Well, at that time, now it feels pretty great, and I have Pro Tools 2021, and it's stable. It never does anything, and I can throw a bunch of VIs on there, and it hangs in there.
That's good to know, because once they went to subscription model, that was the other reason that I was like, I'm not gonna subscribe to my DAW company. You know what I mean? Like I got so used to they'd release a new version every year or two, and you would just buy it, and they usually gave you a discount for being having a previous version or whatever. So it wasn't like a big deal. But just subscribing in perpetuity, like I hate that so much.
Yeah, something not good. Wagyu in the chat room is talking about Atari ST, and it looks like what he might have been using.
That's cool. I wish I would have known about all that stuff, but we did like the internet was around back then, but like I didn't know where to go or what, I didn't know how to find out. Now you got YouTube and Google and all these things that make it like super easy to find out. Like
Yeah.
you want to figure
Yeah.
out something, you can probably figure it out fairly easily. But back then I didn't know anybody and I didn't know where to go online. I know there was some like forums like Harmony Central and some of these other
Yeah.
ones, but
Oh man,
I didn't know about any of that stuff, So it was really
Exactly.
difficult for me starting out. And then I try and talk to people. I remember like I'd post stuff to like mp3.com or what was the other place? There was a couple like websites like that where you'd post your stuff. There was one where you would get like if you did reviews of other people's stuff, then it would like let people listen to your stuff and review it. And I remember trying to get like information from some of these guys that were better than me, and they just did not want to tell me anything.
That's not what this show is about, is it?
No, it's so frustrating. It's crazy. I figured like to get to the level I'm at now, I figure like if I had access to the information that's available today, I could have cut that time way down. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, if you got a problem now, you can either look it up on YouTube or Google it, or go to Gear Sluts or whatever it's called now, and yeah, you can get some answers. But back in the old days, yeah. But before that, you had to know. Steve Powell's also saying I started with Atari ST and Cubase. What my buddy had that I just always wanted, because I always wanted to get into sequencing. But I never had the rig. I literally didn't devote much money to keyboards because I needed to keep funneling that money into my drums and whatnot. But I think it's Mark of the Unicorn Performer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, a digital performer. Is that what that is?
Was it Digital Performer? Yeah,
I think so. I think that's the dog. That's a dog that Motu
from a long time ago.
Yeah,
it was like in the 80s or something.
Yeah, I think that's what I think that's what I was using in the mid 90s in the class.
There you go.
Okay, yeah.
And it was
weird.
And
now you don't even. I don't know anybody that uses that. It's like Logic, Ableton, or Pro Tools, and maybe Cubase.
Cubase, yeah.
Cubase, yeah.
Well, I'm curious, Tim. Like
Fruity Loops.
In Nashville, there, like when you do sessions and talking to people stuff, what's kind of the breakdown? I know like Pro Tools has basically been the ubiquitous thing. When you talk to more home studio musicians, it's a little more spread out as to what they use. But in the studios there, does that like pretty much reign supreme, or is Cubase and Logic coming up, or Studio One, or what do you think?
No, I mean, in any of the big commercial studios, I'm pretty sure they have whatever that you might want, so you can bring your session in, So I'm sure they have Logic, but definitely the breakdown kind of is more like a lot of home studios. A lot of people use Logic. It's cheap. It does a bunch of stuff. They've really caught up in the audio sense, and they've always been rocking in a MIDI sense and in a sequencer way. They've been great with that for a long time. So I think that would be the strata of the home studios. Some people Pro Tools in that environment too, but by and large, any big commercial studio that's doing live band tracking and like what I did today, where there's 6 guys playing at once, reading a chart and interpreting a song live, that's all Pro Tools. It's everywhere pretty much. That's the main thing. A couple of people I've seen have tried FL Studio and.
The funny thing about that, one of the reasons I went with Reason is because back then, FL Studio was just called Fruity Loops, and it was the biggest pile of crap I'd ever seen. I hated it. I hated it. It's like the most complicated, stupid DAW. And now, like, I remember seeing like Avicii or somebody like used it, and I was like, What this thing's still around? Like I didn't even know it was still a thing. And they, it's gotten a lot better, but I was still
they've
like,
come a long way.
Wow.
They have come a long way. It's still not like it's still not there. It's definitely not got the capabilities that Pro Tools does. But
it was awful back then. I mean, really, really awful.
Well, there always has to be that one. Those guys, yeah, they came to town and interviewed a bunch of, Nashville local engineers that are hammering down a lot of sessions and asked for input. So they're
Mm.
trying. They're
Yeah,
trying to get it better, but
I still think they need to pretty much start over. I feel the same way about Reason too. Like Reason was
just burn it
Reason,
down.
Reason for the longest time you couldn't record separate audio. Like it was only what instruments it came with. But eventually they came out with a program called Record. Okay,
Oh,
and that you could record do multi-track recording with an audio interface, and then they combined them into Reason, and it just convoluted the whole. Like one of the nice things about Reason was the design of it was a rack, and you could flip it around, you could do your own cabling and stuff. But then when they put that Record application in there, it just made the whole thing a giant mess. And that's still the style it is now. It's still that same convoluted, crappy mess. But the smart thing they did, and I remember like hammering on them one time on one of my live shows, being like, "What's up with Reason? Like, what are they going to just release all these? Because they've got some really good effects, and I always wanted to be able to use some of the effects that I had in Reason on other stuff that I was working on in Pro Tools or Ableton. So they've finally released it to where you could use their rack effects and instruments as a plugin instead of using a rewire, because you used to be able to kind of do stuff with rewire, but it was only one way, right? It would only be from Reason to Pro Tools.
right.
You couldn't go the other way, right? So if I wanted
No.
to use, if I had like a synth and I wanted to use like the reverb, was it the RV7000 or whatever it is that's in Reason? You can't do that unless you record it and then import it into Reason.
Right.
Record thing. It's so
yeah, you're right.
they made a good move, but that's also the last time I bought Reason was when they finally did that to where I could use it as a plugin. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. And that you're saying without rewire, right?
Without rewire, yeah, to where I
Yeah,
can actually drop in like effects
I
from
can-
Reason into Ableton and use those. Yeah.
Nice. Reason was cool. It had some great synths in it, I thought.
It did. I remember like learning some really cool techniques with their sampler too. Like they have the NNXT, and then I can't remember what the original one was. Because the cool thing about Reason is like when it first started, like they only had so many modules or whatever, and then as each release came out, they'd add more and more and more stuff. But I learned how to do like almost, it's like time stretching, but it was like 1990s style time stretching, like Fatboy Slim kind of style stuff, where you would cut your sample up, and that was the other thing they had was that recycle, where you would take a sample in there and you could chop it up into segments like at the syllables or whatever. Then you'd import it into the sampler in Reason, and then you could almost like scan through the sample to slow it down. And it was really cool. That was one of those like kind of, that was one of those things where I was like, that stuff I've heard on the radio. You know what I mean? I was like, that is awesome.
Yeah. That's a cool feature. And that's my experience with Reason has totally been as a plugin with Rewire into Pro Tools.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was having to, split my brain into two different places because I felt like, they never felt homogenized to me. I always felt like now I'm going to crawl into the Reason cave and mess around for a while, and then now I have to get back out and do Pro Tools. And it was just, it was clunky as hell to do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. But I used to use it as a drum machine. When I'd rewire it, so I'd put my one-shot samples into the redrum drum machine, and then I could I can't remember if I would trigger it from Pro Tools or I'd have to pull up like an old project, but I used to basically use it as a drum machine for a long time.
That's cool.
Sorry, Chris, I cut you off. What was that?
Oh, no, I don't even remember now.
Oh.
It's all right.
Sorry, man.
Well, this is what I've been enjoying because, like you guys come from some more electronic in the past than I did. I mean, now we all do it, but to kind of hear, what it was like 15, 20 years ago with this stuff. Like I still, at that point, 15, 20 years ago, I was thinking about rock band stuff. So to me, like Reason and all this kind of stuff, it just wasn't on my radar. I was dying to get something that sounded like a Mellotron and a Mini Moog, going. And so,
at least you knew what that stuff was. I didn't even know what a Mini Moog was back then, which is funny.
That's amazing.
So some of those sounds, I was like, oh man, where the heck, in 20 years ago, where do you find this stuff? Because I need that sound. I remember IK Multimedia came out with their Sampletron, and that was one of the first plugins I bought. It was definitely the first soft instrument that I purchased and used other than GarageBand and Logic stuff. I think it was before I had Logic even. And I was like, all of a sudden I had access to all these vintage Mellotrons, and I was in heaven. I just couldn't even believe it. Like starting to make music that sounded like, it's coming from one of my heroes.
Yeah.
So
but I couldn't find really much information on old analog synthesizers, and I hardly anybody knew anything about them. One family friend that wasn't a musician, but just kind of one of those guys that was into music and knew a lot about different stuff. He's like, "Oh yeah, you should a Mini Moog. That's the one you got to check out and get." And then, going on all those old internet. What were they called? Those pages that they're kind of like a proto forum kind of stuff,
like a BBS, like a bulletin board type thing. Or?
Yeah, bulletin board or stuff like that. And I can't remember. There was it like GeoCities or something like that? I don't remember. And I mean, Marshall, you talked about like hearing trance music for the first time, and like, well, what is this? This is incredible.
Yeah.
And for me, I was like listening to classic rock, and actually, a lot of my first synth heroes were, guitarists and bassists in these bands that were playing with synthesizers, because it was almost like that they were. Like synth was on the table for everybody. It's like you're the guitar player or the bassist. Yeah, you're equally the synthesis as the piano player, the organist. So like
Yep.
Roger Waters and David Gilmour and Pete Townsend and John Paul Jones, who's a great keyboardist in his own right. Those guys, and then try to find information about that. I just had such a hard time. But, some of those early sounds, I was just blown away. I mean, hearing the solo to Lucky Man by Emerson, Lake and Palmer was one of those moments for me, like cruising in my old 63 Chevy. Oh, no, not that, because I didn't have a radio. It was some other car I had. I was driving somewhere, and I heard that song on the radio, and I pulled over because it's like, what the heck is that? I knew it was a synthesizer, but I mean, in the 90s, like, the kind of synth stuff that I heard was a lot of like the soft pad stuff that you would ruin rock songs with,
Yes.
And so all of a sudden to hear this like
That's perfect.
crazy Moog modular and reverb and all this stuff and just going nuts. I'm like, oh, I know that's a synthesizer, but damn, why does that sound so good compared to everything else? And then, like Welcome to the Machine or Led Zeppelin's In the Light, stuff like that. I was just like, man, these sounds are incredible. Why isn't anybody doing this anymore?
Yeah. Because it went totally out of fashion. That's why. Because nope, not doing that anymore. And then it's DX7. There you go. Which didn't ruin rock and roll. It ruined synthesizers.
Well, the funny thing is, when I started trying to teach myself how to do this stuff, everything I made sounded 80s. It didn't sound anything like I wanted. It sounded like old, crappy Tron music, like really bad. And the thing is like, I remember when people told me my stuff sounded 80s, I took offense to that, like really bad. And now, like 80s synthwave and all that stuff, like popular, and I'm like, I just can't win, man. I'm always on like the wrong. I'm on the wrong pick at the wrong time.
I was talking to Sai about this. And he's a little over 10 years older than me. So I mean, figure the '80s were to him what the '90s were, for me, and so I remember, when I started playing guitar and really got into it, the kind of synth stuff and that. Anybody that was listening to these bands like Depeche Mode or Human League or any of that kind of stuff, I was like, they were dorky as hell. Like, I wouldn't hang out with those people. Like, oh, they're listening to that crap still. It was just not cool music at all. I mean, after grunge came in and everything, and
Oh yeah.
all the kind of end of the thrash metal stuff was still hanging around, like Megadeth and Metallica and stuff. And it's like, none of that '80s stuff. That was about the dorkiest stuff. I mean, there was a few songs on there that I would come up on MTV or something. I'm like, oh, that was still a good song, though. Like Aha's Take On Me or something. Like, I would still listen to it. But the funny thing I was thinking is, like, that was all the cool stuff that Cy grew up with. And then I was thinking, I thought about it a little bit longer. Like, all the stuff that I was liking in those my early days is all the stuff that for Cy was the super uncool stuff that, like, who would want to listen to that crap, like Led Zeppelin,
Did anyone ever say that ever? I don't want to listen to Led Zeppelin. Like, really? How could you not? How could you say that?
Well, I think for rock guys, they probably have held their own pretty well over the years, but I imagine, like, probably by the mid '80s they were pretty uncool, as when you had a lot of the hair bands and metal stuff going on, that maybe Led Zeppelin wasn't the coolest thing at that point.
Well, Bonham already kind of offed himself, anyways.
Yeah,
It didn't matter. But didn't Plant put out like some kind of synthy based? He did. He had a record out that had a lot of synthesizers on it, and it was just him. You know what I'm talking about? Have you ever heard that record? I can't think of the name of it.
I've got,
like, if you heard a track, you'd know it.
Yeah, I've got a lot of his early solo stuff, and it was. I don't know if I have his first album or not, but I mean the early ones I have from maybe like the mid to late '80s were synth and a whole bunch of band instruments, but very purposely. I'm not Led Zeppelin anymore.
Right, exactly.
But he ended up having a really great sound, and his kind of two different eras of music I thought were both great.
Yeah, it did work. It's just kind of odd.
But I just thought it was funny that, like, being just slightly off in age, like there's that staggering of cool music. So it's like, oh, nah, that stuff. I mean, the funny thing to think about. So I mean, in the '90s, I was loving the classic rock, and I liked the stuff that was out in the day, like Smashing Pumpkins and Stone Temple Pilots and stuff, and hard rock like Van Halen and all that.
Yes.
But then new metal hit, and I was like, oh, forget this. Like, I'm out. Like, no more new music, especially not new metal. No. And I'm kind of wondering, like, is that stuff going to come back? I'm sure it will, but, like, I'm not looking forward to that.
I mean, I grew up, like, that was like right around when I graduated, that new metal stuff was coming out. But it was also when trance started getting popular too. But I remember liking some of the new metal stuff. But I also liked some of the older stuff. And my old man, he was always into like ELO and some Pink Floyd and some of that stuff. So I always kind of liked that stuff too. This is interesting how everything goes through a cycle, but it always kind of changes. And now, like, I can't hardly listen to anything new. I think that means I'm officially old. I hate it all. It's all sounds like crap to me.
How do you really feel?
Yeah.
I don't know, like some of the modern pop, not the real repetitive, like I don't want to hear any Ariana Grande type stuff, but I had a guy that had played in bands with, it was a really good friend. He was a pro bassist and played with a lot of pop acts, so like he played for Katy Perry and Avril Lavigne, and I think he did work for Miley Cyrus and stuff. And it was just like this guy that Tool was his life, like heavy prog rock type stuff, and Primus, and all that kind of stuff. And he was I just like bicked head, black everything all the time, black nails and stuff. And then he was playing for like these like pop stars type stuff, and I always thought it was kind of funny. But then he had vocal students for a long time, and we would just do like garage band stuff, like just fun get together, like help his singers to perform live, and we would do things and record it. And so all for a while, maybe like 10 years ago, we were doing all these pop songs I would never have ever listened to. It just was not in my world at all, and all that kind of stuff. And so I wouldn't have given it the time of day, but some of the stuff was actually ended up being pretty well written and well performed, and it was very surprising to find some of that was actually good music. I mean, there's a lot of crap out there, and I've heard people playing the radio, and I'm like, I don't really get this music. It's very repetitive, but other things have been really amazing.
It's more there's like no melodies anymore. It's all
da
da da da da da da.
Yeah,
it's all almost monotone, like one or two
right,
notes, and that's it. And it's like that's boring to me. Like,
yes,
I don't know if there is good stuff. Somebody said here in the chat there, Steve did. There's good modern stuff out there. It just takes a while to find. Yeah, I would like to find some, because sometimes like that's how I get a lot of inspiration for stuff. And recently, when I'm listening to stuff, it's like old from the 90s. That's kind of been my kick lately. I'm listening to a lot of 90s stuff, like rock or pop, or even the trance and techno and stuff that came out back then. Because the modern stuff, it has no melody. It doesn't have any feelings. I don't know. Like, it just feels like, I don't know. I don't like it.
There is a ton of cool stuff, and Wagyu was saying kind of the same thing that Steve was, and it's the case because you don't really get fed it, like Wagyu was saying, via radio or TV so much anymore. You kind of got to go dig now, because there's, millions and millions of, tunes out there. But there's some great stuff. Whenever I've just goofed around and like gotten on Apple Music or anything and just kind of goofed around and listened to some stuff, there's some amazing stuff out there. I found this band called, it's a guy, I think, but Bass Nectar. Have you ever heard? I mean, it's like really synth heavy, but it's interesting.
That's funny, because Bass Nectar was like an event that they used to throw in Colorado. It was like a big festival.
I mean, that's just like one thing I'm finding, but yeah.
Like that's interesting. So, do you have any other strategies, either you or Chris, on how you go about trying to discover new stuff? Because that's something like I'm not good at it, apparently.
Well, anytime that I've tried to search for it,
let us know.
Yeah. Anytime I've tried to search for it, I can't find anything. Again, I keep coming across that same kind of stuff where it's very monotone and it's like kind of almost spoken.
Yeah.
And I don't really care for that. But where I think has been the most success is if you get over the idea of it, because in my head, like, that's the one thing in the synth community, they talk a lot about synth pop, and to me, pop was a bad word growing up, and it's like, man, I'm a rock guy, so don't talk to me about pop. Yeah. and so like where I found the most interesting stuff was actually some of the big female pop stars. And again, certain ones that are a little more at least sophisticated in their music and have got good songwriters and whatnot. And so like giving them kind of a second chance, like again, with my buddy, like performing some of these songs like, Shakira or Pink or even Miley Cyrus. Like, these are not names that I would have ever gone to, but they do actually have some good songs. And actually, the other obvious one, Billie Eilish, and her brother Phineas, I think his name is.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got and you listen to it, it's like, okay, it's catchy, but there's things going on in the music, and that there's movement, and there's production techniques. And a lot of times I'm listening to the production techniques because some of these really well produced pop stars, the production is incredible. I mean, after you get kind of past the loudness wars, like, and into something that's a little more natural. But that's kind of been the area. Yeah, I guess to mine is like, what is the community at large kind of offer up as being the greats? Yeah, that's
Hello.
that's kind of where I was searching.
Oh yeah. Well, here's a great resource that's really simple, and it's Bandcamp. Bandcamp is
Mm,
very cool if you just subscribe to it or whatever. Just log in, and man, there'll be like 20 songs every day that are different, that are new. And I hear not only stuff that's in electronic based stuff whatsoever, but just kind of indie
yeah.
rock or indie folk, or I mean, it's just like it's a sampling all over the place. And every day they have different ones. It's a great resource to just go and kind of click through till something sort of catches your ear.
Hmm.
And then once you do that, you can kind of go down the rabbit hole with, well, if you liked that, then you may like
Hmm.
this sort of recommendation. And so that's, I mean, you can find a ton of that. And that's really kind of what I do on Apple Music when I'm goofing around, is I'll find a few things I like, and then it'll suggest things that might be similar. A lot of times it's, you don't get anywhere, but a lot of times, you can find some cool stuff out there. I found
Hmm.
some really noisy thing. Let me see. I'm going to go back and see if I can find that in my. But really noisy, kind of almost industrial. It inspired me to do some stuff like that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, you hear stuff and it's like stuff you maybe wouldn't have thought about, or it's kind of new and fresh and gives you some ideas.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. It
that's
was
that's
that.
what
Yeah.
it's one of the coolest things about listening to music for me, because when I listen to stuff, I'm picking it apart. I'm like, how did they do this? What synth did they use
Yeah.
here, or what instrument or whatever? And I'm checking out how did they mix this? How's the layering sound? And I'm like literally breaking the whole song down in my head and trying to figure out how they did it. And sometimes you'll come across like production techniques or like a cool sound or something, and you're like, wow, that's cool. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna try something like that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to find this one thing, but anyway, keep going.
Yeah. And one of my hangups that I realize is a hangup is that when I'd be
Nice.
sitting working on a song, like, to find a very simple chord progression, and I'm like, oh, that's been done before, that's been done for, and I think that's one of the things that pop music can offer you, because they recycle so many chord progressions ad
Yeah.
nauseum. But the key is to, like, well, what are you going to do with that? Because everybody's using this format, this 4 chord sequence or whatever. How can we do it differently? And so when it comes back to there's some great chord progressions that I really like, but I always kind of stray away from them because I feel like, well, that's been done by so many people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's finding the new way to do that, because obviously, well, there are 12 tones, so here we go.
Mm.
Uh, and finding, new ways of, like, using power changes, like 5, 6 minor, 4, 1 or something, huge, that you hear all the time, but finding new ways of doing it. Speaking of it, like in pop music, Sia, you guys familiar
Yeah.
with that, with her?
Yeah.
No,
Um,
what is that? Sorry.
her name is Sia, Sia, and
Oh, it's
she
an
does.
artist.
Yeah, she's an artist. She
Okay.
does a song. It's been around for a while. This is not a new song, but it's a great example of, like, it's nothing really special chord wise necessarily, but it's the approach that they used. And her vocal is crazy, and there's melody. It's called
Yeah.
Chandelier.
Mm.
Oh, I'll have to
Yeah,
look that up.
that's amazing. But here, while I've got this, so this record that I was telling you about, that's kind of noisy and interesting, and it doesn't really have melody. It is kind of that thing, but it's really interesting. It's called Decadent Yet Depraved. It's by Belief Defect. That's, I mean, both you guys would get something out of that. It's just like, oh wow, that's really different.
Mm.
It's, and it kind of inspires you to go. anything that pushes you down a road for a second, right? That just gets you out of your, I always do things this way, you know, and you hear something that kind of triggers something, then you go, whoa, what would my version of that be?
Yeah.
I do like coming across that music that just, like, what was that for a second? What's that? What's that synthfluencer with the crazy hair? European. He just did the project with, or he's doing the project with the 1,000 oscillator drone guy and Heinbach. He's
I saw something about that. Yeah,
he's the third guy in that, and I can't remember somebody.
yeah,
Cuckoo.
somebody maybe in the
Cuckoo, yeah, Cuckoo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard one of his old songs. I mean, it was a few years ago, or I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. And he had done a video, and it had a gal, and they're like trying to meet but don't ever meet. But the music on it really was interesting. It felt very fresh and different. And the guy's very talented, and I just like how it kind of caught me off guard when I first heard it a few years ago. I was kind of scanning, looking for stuff on YouTube, and all of a sudden there's this thing that's like, what? How did you come up with this? It's so random. It feels so random, but it all fits together.
So I was laughing at Paul's
Ramsey.
comment.
Oh, Paul's.
Yeah. Have you checked out Gulp K-pop? No.
Gulp K-pop. Well, I like this one. Now I want to. This is from Ramsey. Now I want to hear an actual baby trapped in a beanbag. Sample that stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, I sampled a bunch of crickets and then detuned them and then sidechained them as like a groove on songs for the summer solstice that I did.
Yeah.
And so it becomes like a percussion thing that's kind of happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sample that.
I never did a lot of sampling, honestly. Like I was always like trying to figure out how to make cool sounds on synths. So I like the sampling stuff to me is I still don't really do it a whole lot unless I'm doing a vocal or something. And that, we could probably have a whole show on vocals. That's like the hardest thing for me is trying to figure out not only like what to put in a track, but how to mix those vocals into where they don't sound like garbage. That's very complicated to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things I struggle with still.
That's a real niche part of the art. It really, I mean, it's like the thing most people want to hear is a vocal. So
yeah,
but it's kind of like the hardest thing to get right.
Yeah.
And when it's right, it's just like, oh, that's seamless. And, it sticks out in the mix just right, and it's not all squashed, but it's like, it sounds cool and it's double track just right, or whatever the techniques are, right?
Yeah, that'd be something I'd like to learn more about is mixing for vocals, because I just don't do it that often. But every now and then, like I'm like, I want to throw something in here, and then I'm like sitting there for like hours trying to make it sound good,
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it is one of those hard things. Like I think for me, when I first started recording, bass was the hard instrument to get right for me.
Yeah.
And I mean, not in terms of playing it, because I had played bass for a long time, bass guitar, but the actual recording of it and the expectations of how I wanted it to sound. And one of the blessings had been there's so many of these where isolated tracks. Now there's a lot on YouTube where they've used like RX9 or whatever to isolate them, and it's not that great, even though that's an amazing program. But the ones that have access to the original isolated tracks, whatever they are, vocals or bass, and I remember how shocked I was about bass guitar, and it really set me on a good course. And so, of course, one of my favorite songs ever would be Tom Sawyer by Rush. And that was one of those early synth songs, it's like rock, and it has Oberheim and Moog on it, and that song has everything, you know.
Yeah.
And
In my head. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, no kidding.
Hearing
but
it.
the
Yeah,
but that bass guitar on there is absolutely killer. I mean, Getty's bass lines and how he's locking in with Neil, and then I heard so just being interested in tones, you know, for whatever it is, guitar, bass, synth. You know, like somebody had posted the bass line out of it. And I listened to it. I was kind of shocked because that was one of the tracks that really, especially early on, I was like, man, that is a great bass tone. It's growly and it sounds good and it fits in the right place in the song. And I heard it isolated. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's really dirty and it doesn't have much low end. And it's kind of a little bit trashy sounding. I would never have dialed in that sound on any bass that I was playing, and it just kind of floored me. And then after that point, I mean, that's such a simple thing. I mean, we're not talking about hours and hours of music classes on how to record bass. It was like that one little moment that just turned my mind about it, because I would set up stuff to play bass live, and I, you know, had a decent tone, but for recording, like to where you fit it in the mix, like that shocked me, and it really helped me change the way I recorded bass. And I want to do that more with vocals, because that's one of the things is that I'm noticing, like, well, there's no one way to do it. And sometimes, you know, a great sounding vocal is really thin. And I think, you know, I've noticed on some music, like if I really think about, especially while I'm recording vocals, I've got my tracks and I'm working on it and I go and check a reference track, I'm kind of shocked about like how much they shave away out of it, out of the vocal to make it fit in the song.
Yeah, you gotta have room for everything else that's going on. It's kind of
But then there's other tracks where the vocal's absolutely dominating everything else. Like, oh, there's a little bit of shaker behind it and maybe a occasional kick and snare and a soft pad or something, but they're sitting way back and there's just this vocal and its reverb that's huge and takes up everything. And so
yeah, that's got to be like obviously a decision based on like how the composition is made, right? Like, so if you want to focus on heavy vocals like that, then you need a minimalist kind of instrumental.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, because if you have like a super loud vocal and the band is rocking, it makes the band sound not rocking.
Yeah.
You know, because it just makes a band sound small. And so you push that vocal back in there a little bit where it's almost competing with the band. And then now everything feels loud, you know, without you having to turn it up. You know what I'm saying? It's just like a better balance for something really aggressive. But on other stuff like that Billie Eilish stuff, you can hear her lips smacking, you know, basically. It's so intimate and cool on that level. Like, kudos to them for finding a new approach that was fresh sounding. Whether or not you like the music, I mean, just production standpoint.
Yeah. I think that's one of the good things about modern pop music is that, you know, putting things into balance. And some of the things that I enjoyed most about older music is like finding all those little details to put into the music and to build up the orchestration of it, of all the instruments and how you fit them together, and these clever little parts that come in and out. And, you know, again, very much like a George Martin type of thing. Like there's all these things that are interesting that catch the ear at different times, but they're kind of a busy track. But there's so many interesting things. But then to balance that with, at times you do need to pull it just all straight back, because sometimes that one thing, that one vocal or whatever, if you let that just really stand out in front and shine, it can be really impactful. And so that just kind of gives us more tools to work with, like in working on a song, like, well, does this need more or less? And probably something that's, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Oh, just one more thing that's probably demonstrates that is I've enjoyed a lot of these great classic rock albums that they've done the, you know, remixed or remastered, and then they've added extra tracks on that were done and not put on the album, and then different versions of it. So something like Good Vibrations, for instance, by the Beach Boys. absolutely epic. I mean, one of the greatest songs ever, in my opinion. But yet, if you hear the whole thing, like all the parts that they cut out of it, and some of the parts, and same thing with some Beatles songs and stuff that like where they've had little guitar lines and things that were over parts, and then you hear it with the stuff in that they cut out. You're like, oh, that kind of ruins it. It was good that they cut it out and they edited it down and just brought the important parts out.
Yeah, you could tell they made a good choice. The sad thing though, when you said Good Vibrations, I didn't think of Beach Boys.
Oh no. No. No.
No!
I just made Chris's head go. Sorry, man. Then you said Beach Boys. I was like, oh yeah, I know that one too.
Are we talking? Are we talking about a song with like a 909 snare in it?
Yeah, that was like the whole song.
Oh my god, that's hilarious.
Sorry, Chris. My musical tastes are not very, sophisticated. I apologize. I grew up in the 90s, man. It was 909s and piano stabs. That was,
Yeah. There you go.
Those really like super compressed, like Roland Rompler piano type sounds.
Yep. Or M1.
Yeah,
M1, that's the one. There it is. Yeah. Oh God, I wanted an M1 so bad when they came out. I had just moved to Los Angeles and I wanted an M1 so badly because it like, it was multi-timbral. You could do onboard sequencing. This is something I'd never had before. And I wanted it so bad. And the sounds were cool. And it was fresh in the moment.
Yeah.
And the moment wasn't long lived, I guess, in a way. Except for, isn't that sort of the de facto piano sound for house?
Yeah.
So it's just around.
Yeah. Like the house and techno stuff, like from the, I'd say, mid 90s-ish.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was in everything. I didn't know it was from an M1 until I was much older, but it's one of those things. The funny thing though is I've heard people talk about how like back then people wanted M1 so bad they were like giving away their old analog stuff.
Oh yeah.
Now it's a fortune. It's kind of funny how that works.
Well, can I tell a quick story about that? I mean, we all have these stories, I'm sure. But mine's around the same time. It's like probably 1990, and I moved to LA, and I had an original TR-808, and I had bought it back in about '81. Whenever "In the Air Tonight" came on by Phil Collins, whenever that came out, rather, I was like, I just that's so cool, and production-wise, and everything about that song, of course. So I bought one. It was $999. Shipped to my door, and I used it and goofed with it forever. And I did some sessions with it and everything. It was cool. It was very useful, and I just loved having it. And it was so much fun to play with. I moved to Los Angeles, and in about 1990, Alesis had come out with the HR1 digital sampled drum machine, which does not hold up. Trust me, it's nothing you'd ever want to go back to. But I didn't have anything like that had actual sampled drum sounds. So I traded this dude who was also a drummer and was higher up by far than me in LA in the studio hierarchy. I traded him my 808 for this HR-16, which was like, and I think he walked away with it under his arm, and just going, yep.
He's like,
yep, I just did you, man. And of course, and now I just kick myself because it'd be so much fun to have an original, and it was mine, from the get-go. But HR-16, wow, no.
Yeah, I never even heard of that one.
Yeah,
that's a Alesis.
It's an Alesis. Yep. It like I say, I think it maybe came out in '90 or so. I don't know, but it was. Was
it the one that's like about this big or so? Had a big dial on it.
It didn't have a dial on it. It was all push buttons, and it had a little flip up top that had instructions inside of it, and then just a little LCD screen. But it was kind of a pale gray color and sort of a wedge shape. Anyway,
okay.
Okay.
HR
what?
It was an HR what? What was it?
HR-16. Yeah.
16.
So the one that I was.
16-bit.
So my first drum machine was a Roland DR-110. which thanks to Alex Ball, I'll never be able to buy one again.
Right.
Like, damn it.
There it is. There's the HR60. Or yep, that's it.
Yeah, it
Paul
looks
Altola's.
like a 90s telephone.
Oh, it's
Oh, like a answering machine, right?
Yeah, like an answering machine or something.
oh my god! It had MIDI though. You know, it had MIDI, so I could play it off of pads and whatever else. It was like so much cooler, I thought, than the 808. Unbelievable.
Yeah, the one that I had was after it was the Alesis SR16. Paul Artola just puts it up there, and I looked it up. Like, yeah, that was the one that I remember, and it was very early '90s sounding. I think it's the longest running drum machine in production.
They still make it.
Yeah, they still make it.
Yeah,
They do.
And
I have one.
I remember, like, whenever I got it, like probably the late '90s, and it being, I felt like already by then it was like really dated sounding. Like,
it's just fascinating that they still make that thing.
It is, and I think it's all the same sounds. I don't think they changed anything. And all
now
go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
All I've ever used, well, I did use it to program for a while, but not for very long. And then now it's just my dedicated, it was for a while, my dedicated click track in a live situation, because you could actually roll through the songs and it saves tempos and names, and which a lot of things back in the day didn't do, like in early 2000s and whatnot. Now it's like, now it's Ableton and everybody, it's a whole different thing, but it would do that. So that's why I still have it in my gig bag.
Oh, there's an SR18 too.
Oh man, there was one preset on the SR16 that I always remember. It had a ton of reverb. It was like a heavy tom type thing. Boom, boom, dum, boom, dum, 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 boom, boom, dum, dum.
Oh, you mean? Oh, yeah. It was a preset pattern on there.
Yeah, preset pattern on there. I just always remember that one.
That's amazing. Doom, 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 doom. Yeah, use that. Hey, call that one up, man. Let's write a song around that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. There was that I still have a little. Man, in the '90s, Alesis had some great gear. I had a quadriverb, and I still have a little. I can never remember which one it is. I think it's I don't know if it's the microverb or the picoverb or something. It's like a little half rack.
Yeah.
Reverb.
Micro.
That was, I've had that for ages. I haven't used it in a long time. I had it set up with like a sound system, but some of those are great. There was what the heck's the name of the company? Oh, was it Cornef maybe? Plugins that did a plugin version of a couple of those old, I think it was the mini verb and the microverb or something, reverb in the box. And it was hilarious because I went and got it, and it's those like very early 90s reverb sounds that are, it's not like, you're thinking about Lexicon from the 80s or something, or even Lexicon from the 90s.
Right.
It's just like really lo-fi digital reverbs. And man, it really it takes you back to a moment in time.
That you don't want to go back to.
I like some of the 90s cheese now. That's the funny thing, is I do kind of listen to some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I kind of like it again. Like, when it was happening, you didn't know any better. And then you hated it because then it became dated and old. And then you kind of like listen to it some more, and then you're like, I don't know, this was kind of cool. Some of it, right?
Hey, have either one of you guys ever gotten your hands on an Alesis Andromeda? Oh,
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I see someone pointing.
Yeah.
I forgot.
Andromeda right there.
I totally forgot you had that. Oh, you got it. All right, talk about it.
It's cool. I've only done like one little demo video of it, but it's dope, man. It's like 16-part multi-timbral. I don't know what else to say. Like, it sounds really good. It's a really nice sounding synth. The thing is that some of them I think have weird pot issues, and then I've heard people have issues with the voice cards. That one's been fine now. I've had that for, I think I got that in 2019 when I first got out here. I bought that.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I need to do more stuff with it. But,
Yeah.
They're supposed to be pretty unique, but I've never really gotten them as
yeah, some people hate them. Some people, I think they're really cool. I think it's a really nice sounding synth.
It's amazing. Right back here.
There you go. I got one.
That's so cool.
Go ahead, ask for another one. He'll point in a different direction.
Yeah, I know. How about like, I don't know, like a rack of little fatties? You know, I don't know.
Oh yeah, little fatties. Yeah, I'm trying to think. 8990, got one?
Yeah. Maybe a subsequent 37 with CV.
No, I don't have that one. Sorry.
You don't have that one?
Jamie has that. I just got the regular sub 37. Sorry.
Oh well, you don't care about CV anyway.
No, I don't. That's what I remember when they came out. That I was like, who wants CV on anything? Like, that's like a whole different world. The modular guys.
Yeah. I didn't see it coming for me, but when I bought my subsequent 37, they had the CV version, and I thought, I should just get that because it's the flagship version of the synth. Like I shouldn't cheap out. I should just go the extra mile, but I didn't. I just got the normal one, and then all of a sudden, like little by little, I've kind of gotten into having CV everywhere, and now I wish I had it on there.
I think you can modify the. I don't know. I know you can on the little fatty, where you can get a kit and then add CV to it. I don't know. I have to look, because you might be able to just get a kit for it.
I bet you could.
Yeah.
I bet you're right. Yeah, because now the thing, for me, is just exploring modular is so much fun.
Well, and one of the cool things is some of the work you did on that Team US track with the glitching out of the percussion and stuff. I was like, how the hell did he do that? And you're like, oh yeah, it's this little module right here. I just like hit mute, unmute, a couple times.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
I didn't get one of those. That was cool, man.
That's a cool little module. That is the data bender by Qubit.
But it's weird because little tiny elements like that really add, at least to me when I'm listening to stuff. I hear that stuff and I go like, oh, that's cool,
Yeah, that ear candy stuff that keeps the arrangement driving and whatnot. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, Tim. You also have like a Morphogene.
I do. I have
those.
I do. I have Morphogene, and the other thing that's sort of like that is it's made by Instruo. It's called Arbor, and it kind of does sort of a granular thing, and really Morphogene is more about scanning the sample, kind of Marshall, like you were talking about.
Yeah,
that plugin and Reason that did it. But this does it with CV and on the fly modulations. It's whacked. It's very.
You mean
cool.
that one does it like in real life?
Yeah, in real time and whatnot. Yeah, you can like run stuff through it and mess with it in real time from CV.
That's cool.
That's fun.
That's super cool. Because there's some synths that I have that have some sampling capabilities. Like the Quantum's pretty cool because you could do some really funky granular stuff. And I've seen there was one guy, I can't remember who it is now. There was a guy who did like a little demo running his voice through it, and it was freaking cool sounding.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of synths that you can do stuff like that. So that's cool that like in the modular area, like there's so much like experimentation and like innovation that you could find all kinds of crazy fun stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like you have to go more in the box for some of that stuff with synths.
Definitely.
Isotope had Iris, which was kind of cool, but it seemed like it's abandoned and it looks like it's very old plugin. But if they could spruce that up, and it would be great. And of course,
and you didn't get Beat Tweaker. Remember that BT one?
Oh yeah,
that was an Isotope. I was like, come on, guys.
File that under Good Vibrations, please.
Yeah, it says. I like BT, but That plugin was a joke.
Yeah, like Pigments and
Oh
would
yeah.
be another one where you can sit and kind of tweak those things with the granular engine.
Oh yeah. There's one. Native Instruments makes some cool granular stuff too. One's called Farlight, and the other's called.
Oh yeah,
It's very
Ashlight.
yeah, and it's like vocal based, but you can get all granular with the samples, and it's a
Yeah,
very cool plugin. It's
Yeah.
kind of it
yeah.
kind of does. I mean, Morphogene kind of does that same sort of bit. It just does more, and it has verb in it, and has effects in it.
Have you guys used any of the mutable instruments clouds or beads or the
I
clones
haven't
therein?
I haven't done any modular other than the semi-modular stuff that I have, like an MS-20 or 2600.
2600. That's all. Yeah,
Uh,
I've got.
I'm sorry, like if you're gonna do semi-modular, like that's probably the coolest synth to use.
Oh, it's got to be.
Yeah.
I've never gotten to mess with one, but that's got to be. And it's just like the sound of my childhood.
It is
Basically,
so cool.
it's like
Can't
oh,
believe they made that thing, and then I have one. It's like what?
that's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
and that Chris has one.
Yeah, and Chris has one too. Chris has an original one. I mean, it's cool.
But yeah, I've got the version of Clouds I have is not made by Mutable Instruments, but it's called Typhoon,
Yeah.
and it does a few more things. It's got a few more patch points on it, a few more things you can access by CV, and it has a few sort of user locations where you can save presets, basically.
I had for quite a while the Grayscale Supercell, which was
So,
basically clouds, but then just like you said, it had a whole bunch of extra things. Plus, I had the fully extended firmware on there, so it had was it parasites and which
There you
and there was some other beat one. I can't remember the name of it now. It started with a K, Camel or something. Those all put in there, and you could just switch the firmware modes on it by a button combination. But actually, that was the last thing I just sold on Reverb, and I've got a Mutable Instruments beads, but I haven't gotten into it too much.
I
But
think
kind of
that's
sad that.
cool.
What? Go ahead. So, what did you say?
No, I was just saying. I think Beads is a really useful module.
Yeah, yeah. Haven't used it as much as I should, but I haven't been spending haven't had a lot of time to spend with Eurorack. So it's when I need to decompress every once in a while, like you go to that, and I don't have anything to do. I don't need to finish a song or do anything else. I'm just going to screw around, which is something that I haven't really gotten to do a whole lot lately.
Yeah.
I hear you.
I mean, I think.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say we're probably over time here. For me, anyway. Like I'm gonna need to jump off here pretty soon.
Well,
You
let's.
Keep going if you want.
Well, we can kind of tie it closed here. So we've got some stuff coming up that'll be pretty interesting to talk about. In fact, we never, our main topic today is like how do these songs, how do we begin songs, as we were talking about at the beginning of the show, and where does inspiration come from? What tools do you go to from the start? Maybe that could be our next week's topic, but we also want to hit. I know in the next couple of weeks, collaboration, because one of the, we did our first collaboration track, and our second one will be coming out soon. But we've all had at least bad experiences with collaborations, and it's pretty rare to have a really great experience. But here in the next few weeks, we'll talk about how that came together, our individual components, as well as not only what gear we used and things like that, but also how did it function? Like, how did we work together to really bring this song into fruition with four people who had never worked on a song together? And that can be a little bit dicey, especially when you're not in a band in a room just jamming it out as a band. So,
Yes.
I would call that a very big success. So it'll be really great to kind of talk that out. And we've had some shorter conversations about it, but I'm really looking forward to hearing the full process and how you guys did what you did on that.
Yeah, that'll be fun to do. Yeah, so that's upcoming for sure. And I did.
So
Sorry, but just as a
go,
quick side note, I did,
yeah,
since we are doing another Team US jam with Jamie from Geosense. Um, I did I did actually throw down a groove the other night. So, one step closer. I started to look for a bass line. I didn't quite get there for that, but I came up with like a vibe. So we'll see what you guys think.
Okay, cool.
awesome,
Yeah, I'm excited.
awesome. I worked on the Tempest this week, and so got it all updated on the firmware. Did all the calibrations for it, updated the sounds and all that kind of stuff, and it's kind of a mess to use. It's not the greatest thing to navigate. So my buddy that owns it, he was waiting for I think I don't remember which one, but maybe the Behringer RD08 to come out, and so he guitar player forever, not really had much in the way of drum machines, and so he's like, yeah, I want to learn drum machines. So he bought this and soon regretted it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the Tempest didn't they like not ever really fix the firmware on that thing too, or did they ever
Well,
get around to fixing it? Because I heard it had issues when it came out.
yeah, I think Sequential is kind of slow to issue firmware, and so yeah, a lot of stuff kind of it looks like from reading the forums that a lot of stuff went unfixed for quite a while, but they did continue to put out some firmware, and the firmware that it has now on the Sequential forum, they basically said this is the last update that we can do for this. It's already long out of production, but they said this is the last one we can do. We don't have any more room on there to hold code, so
Okay.
this is what it is. So I think it may have one or two bugs or something, but it's pretty.
Because it was a really cool like at the time I was kind of like looking for drum machines, and I looked at that one, and then I like read what people were saying about it. And I was like, oh, maybe I should not get that.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd duck, but it is a very interesting drum machine. So
Cool.
I was thinking, like, before we close, maybe the last thing that we could cover, and it would be very brief, is just the name of our show and this group and Thru Port Collective and what it means. And I don't know if you guys want to tackle some of that.
Yeah, definitely. Can I have a go at it?
Go.
Thru Port Collective is sort of a how you say, almost an analogy for learning and then regurgitating, and sharing with other people about things that we learn and our experiences and whatnot. So that's kind of was the general concept, I believe, that we were thinking of, and that we would share our knowledge that we already had, but things that we are learning on the fly and as we go, and then just toss that around in a way, and then toss it around with the chat room, and just kind of discuss things and make it a collective in that way. So I know that's kind of an oversimplification, but that's definitely the general concept behind Thru Port Collective. And it also obviously has a little bit of a MIDI connotation to it, but that's part of what we do. But also it's just kind of a general sharing of knowledge and experience that the three of us have, and Cy when he's available.
Mm-hmm.
Is that close?
Can't wait to pick his brain.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He's got one of the craziest studios I've ever seen. So
The trailer.
yeah.
Yeah, I really like the name, and I mean, you guys had, I think, both come up with different parts of the name of Thru Port and Collective, and we put it together, and I think there's so much, people focus on, things that are, it gets to be more fun to chase the next piece of gear. And I love it. I love doing that, and we all do. and we'll talk about gear a ton on this show, but to kind of have that perspective of like we got to keep moving forward, and that there are always more things to be learned. I think having there's kind of the idea of fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And, people get that are fixed, they tend to they just want to do things the same way all the time. And they don't want to grow, and they don't want to experience new. And with having a growth mindset to kind of be open up and go, well, just because I've done all this stuff or I've accomplished these things, there may be more yet to learn. And so I think that's, a good place to start for what we're doing. And that, gosh, we've, music that's come out of our whole synth community has been incredible. I mean, so much of the music I listen to now are just people that I know online.
Yep.
And I think that's fantastic, because I mean, if I listen to something and I'm enjoying it, I can go and ask the person about how they came up with it, and to ask them those questions and well, how were you thinking about this, and what was your process? And I mean, I've asked both of you guys that on your videos. Like, you come out with a video like, Tim, how did you do that? Like, what was that thing? You're like, oh, well, and also the wonderful thing is that you guys have been very free and open with that knowledge. I don't remember if it was pre-show or during the show that Marshall was talking about. I think during the show that you were talking about trying to get information from people online, 20 years ago, and they wouldn't give it up. Like, they were holding some sort of secret.
And that's part of the reason why I'm super. I mean, people ask me stuff all the time. I don't got anything to hide. I'm not like holding the keys to the Holy Grail either, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, that was always a big problem, and so I'm always as forthcoming as possible if people have questions about stuff. And yeah,
definitely. Chat room. Want to encourage the chat room to ask those questions and to comment and be a part of this too, because I'm definitely paying attention. I got to apparently I needed to log in to make comments myself, and I didn't want to do that and risk knocking myself off. But anyway, it's great to have this immediate live forum like that too, and just let us ramble a little bit.
Yeah. Well, you guys, we'll close it here, but thanks to everybody in the chat. You guys have been, very supportive of us, both here in the show and then just in life and in music. So really appreciate all of you guys. And so many of you are making incredible music, and we look forward to hearing from you as we talk about all these issues and, getting better as musicians and artists and growing. So we'll see you back here next Wednesday at same time. And we'll see you then.
See you guys.
Bye,
Take
guys.
care, everyone.
Thanks. Bye. Bye-bye.